Welcome back, my little dudelings and lady dudelings. Cool, great. Welcome back, guys, to Just Nuts. Today, I'm doing another. Well, not an, I guess another. I have done these before, but I haven't done one in a while. I haven't done one of these let's talk about videos for a specific deck, for a specific archetype, and what they currently can do. But I think Lair of Darkness is a really interesting one. Like, I believe it's like the most viewed deck profile I have on my channel, which is cool, and it's a very special place in my heart. It's one of the first decks when I started playing a little more competitively that I went for, even though it was a very rogue deck. Still had a lot of fun with it, and I think it's like as good as it has been ever before, because we have some new cards that really make this deck pretty spicy. So today we're going to be going through every card that really like Lair of Darkness has access to, that kind of makes it unfair, because realistically, when you look at this deck, the reason it's so enticing to ever play is because it can abuse some unfair things in the game that other decks cannot abuse in the same way. So without further ado, let's talk about Lair of Darkness. The most important card in the deck is Lilith, Lady of Lament. She's insane. 2000 attack, level 3. What? When she's normal summon, her attack gets cut in half. But her important effect is that she has a quick effect where she can tribute any dark monster, including herself if you want to. She'll reveal 3 normal trap cards from your deck, and your opponent randomly chooses one to set on your field, and you shuffle the rest back in. The big thing with this is that you can pick 3 of the same trap card, and you're essentially just searching one straight to the field. It doesn't add it to hand, so it can't be Ash Blossomed. It's a quick effect, so it dodges Veiler, Impermanence, all of those if you're tributing herself. Ogre doesn't touch it. It's literally like unhand trappable, and it's an incredibly insane consistency card. And if you special summon it out, it's just a 2k beat stick, which is really good. So this is the main staple of the card. You'll see where the rest of this deck revolves around this. Next up, we have a Remo, which is a really nice consistency card either way, because he either works as your summon for the turn, or he works as consistency to get you Lair, because he has that classic search effect where you can discard him from your hand to add a Lair of Darkness from deck to hand. So he's a Rhoda, but specifically for Lair of Darkness. Or not Rhoda, Terraforming. But he also has a second effect where you can tribute a dark monster to draw 1 card, or if you tribute a dark monster other than this card, you can add a dark monster with 2000 or more defense from your deck to your hand instead. The main card you'd be searching off of that search is Darkus Diabolos, Lord of the Lair. This is your boss monster. You search him off of Arima if you tribute anything other than himself. And Diabolos has some cool effects as well. So this card on the field cannot be tributed, which means it cannot be kaiju'd, which is a really nice protection, because stuff like that could easily be like outs to this in the right meta, right? And he cannot be targeted with any card effects, another very good protection effect. So 2 really solid protection effects. And then he has 2 different effects, where if a dark monster you control is tributed, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your graveyard if it was there when you tributed, or hand even if not. What this means is that if Arima tributes something that's on your field but not him, and you get to search Diabolos, even though Diabolos wasn't in the hand when you did it, because you tributed a monster you controlled, he says even if he wasn't there when it happened, he gets searched, and then he specials immediately, which is really nice. It's a nice little interaction if you can get it off. Doesn't happen too often, but it's nice. And then just the fact that it's from graveyard or hand, he unclogs himself out of the hand, and once your opponent outs him, if they do, he's super easy to get back on the board in a deck like this. And then his last effect lets you tribute a dark monster to make your opponent place 1 card from their hand on either the top or the bottom of their deck, just essentially being a quick 1-for-1 you trade. Well, also if you have Lair, you tribute an opponent's monster to make them discard or shuffle a card. So it can be a straight up -2 for your opponent, or it's just going to be a 1-for-1, which you will take once you've already established a solid board, right? So there you go. Darkus Diabolos, really strong. Then we move to some of the spell cards. We start with the field spell. This is what the deck revolves around completely. If you couldn't tell, all first of the 3 main monsters all revolve around like tributing your own dark monsters, but not necessarily, because Lair of Darkness has some spicy effects. First thing, it makes all monsters on the field dark monsters. Second effect, once per turn, if you would tribute a monster you control to activate a card effect, you can tribute 1 dark monster your opponent controls, even though you do not control it. So by paying, you're essentially taking your opponent's monster as cost to do, something else, which is really good. This is negatable. This is an activated effect, I believe. So I think this is negatable. It's not just like a continuous effect that lets you do it in place. so it is activated. So there is a lane to be negated or whatever, but it's still really strong, nonetheless. Other than that, it's really important to keep in mind the third effect, which says once per turn during the end phase, special summon as many Torment tokens, 1,000, 1,000, level 3 Fiend tokens, as possible to the turn player's field in defense position up to the number of monsters tributed this turn while this card was face up. This happens, this is like super easy to like lose track of because it is mandatory. And your opponent does get them. If you do disrupt them with Lilith on their turn, or you use a trap card that tributes something, or whatever, on your opponent's turn, they will still get free tokens at the end phase. So you need to be careful with managing that and making sure you're not giving your opponent too many free cards to just defend themselves, but also uses link material in later turns. But still, nonetheless, this card is insane. Just the fact that it turns everything to dark could almost be enough, but the other effects are so good, boosting it up to like really like broken status. This field spell is really insane. Then we have some generic spells that you can really abuse in this deck. Pot of Extravagance, among other draw spells as well. I mean, like, you can play Pot of Duality in here. You can play Card of Demise. You can play Pot of Desires. All four pretty solid draw spells in the deck. I personally prefer Extravagance. I think this deck really only revolves around like 2 extra deck monsters, but you only need 1 per duel, so as long as you're playing 3 copies of each of them, you know what I mean, and you use this and 1 stays, you should be good. And then this is just a draw 2 from there. It doesn't keep you from special summoning, so you can still Super Poly in the same turn, you can still get Diablos out in the same turn, you can still use Tour Guide in the same turn if you play that in the deck. Like, it doesn't restrict you like the other ones do. Card Demise, while it is like maybe the hardest, the one that pluses you the most, it kind of is like the weakest in terms of like how much it restricts you on that turn. Demise with Lilith trying to get 3 copies of the same trap card, or Desires, Desires hurting the chances of really seeing that. And then Duality just conflicting with special summons, which isn't the biggest deal in this deck. So I think like Extravagance plus like Duality might be okay. Maybe Duality only at 2 or something just for consistency. But you do have access to really powerful draw spells like those. You can play the other ones. You just got to assess the risk and make sure you build your deck according to the risks, right? But I think Extravagance for me is probably my favorite one. I know it's expensive, but you know, it is what it is. Next up, the like pretty much the sole reason why I wanted to make this video. Super Poly got moved to 3 on the last ban list, like what, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. It's very recent. And now it's at 3, and this deck used it literally better than any deck in the entire game. Pretty much the like synergy behind this is that while you have Lair of Darkness on the field, it makes everything dark, and there are fusion monsters that just take dark monsters generically. So as long as you have Lair up, you essentially, against any deck that puts more than 1 monster on the field, you can Super Poly them. Makes it really consistent in this deck, and it's good even sometimes without Lair against the right matchup, against Thunder Dragon, possibly against Pendulum, if they make the right board. You can just raw hit them with this card without even putting Lair on the field, which is so insanely strong, right? And it's just playable 3, and you say like, but you never want to see 2. But seeing 2 is actually like kind of good because like you have like an excuse to discard 1, right? Because you have to discard his cost for this card, so you just like discard the other to activate 1. You probably never need 2 in the same duel. And then you just play from there. So Super Poly, really, really powerful. It acts as a disruption. It acts as board breaking potential, and it's just unfair. And if you can abuse it as well as this deck does, you might as well. Next up, a card that also came off the ban list. It was at 1, but now it's at 3, is Monster Gate. This is realistically more of just like a going second card, but maybe it's more of a side deck option for Lair, because Lair tends to want to go first. It's a little slower, so you kind of want that first turn to like get a little head start on your opponent. But maybe in the side deck, when you know you're going second, this could be a pretty strong card, because this card just tributes 1 monster and then excavate cards from the top of your deck until you excavate a monster that can be normal summoned or set, and then you special summon it and send the other excavated cards to the graveyard. Now I know this, like, you don't want to send too many trap cards, and I guess that's definitely a risk in this deck, or send too many copies of Lair or whatever. But I feel like overall, like if you open this plus a way to get to Lair, you just activate Lair and then you tribute an opponent's monster to get a free monster straight from deck without ever using your normal summon, right? Obviously the potential there is extremely high to like make up ground very fast against your opponent. But I also see the weaknesses, like I said, hurting consistency possibly with Lilith if you throw too many trap cards or too many Lairs in the graveyard. And also if you don't open up this with Lair, it's like going to be super mediocre for you, right? So I understand the risk, but it is a card to definitely keep in mind with a deck like this. Then we move to some of the trap cards. Trap Trick, extremely abusable in this deck because Lilith only gets you normal trap cards. You're only playing normal trap cards, so Trap Trick becomes a really nice piece. I don't know if you play it at 3, but even if you just played it 2, the reason you play it here is because Trap Trick just banishes a normal trap from deck to set another copy of the same card, and it can be activated that turn. The drawback is you can only activate one more Trap Trick for the rest of the turn, or one more trap card. Sorry, not Trap Trick. You can only activate one more trap card after this card resolves. So you set something, and then essentially that's going to be the only card you activate for the rest of the turn, trap-wise, which is fine, honestly, because what you do is even if you've drew into one of the cards that you really wanted to search and used it already, but you need another copy, or if you do play Desires and you Desires away one copy or whatever, you can still put Trap Trick in as like the 3rd trap card in Lilith's search, and even if they hit the Trap Trick, you just use Trap Trick to get the same trap card, and you load it up anyway. So it's just consistency in that way, and if you hard draw it, it's just, again, like super consistent and just getting you whatever trap you want at that point. So Trap Trick really strong in the deck. I don't know if it's a 3 of. It might seem like overkill, but still really powerful nonetheless. Artifact Sanctum. I don't want to show too many normal trap cards here because like there's just too many good ones to go through right now. But I didn't want to throw Sanctum out there. I think it's like really important that a lot of people worry about Sanctum and like Scythe because you're like, I play 1 Scythe, but I play 3 Sanctum. I don't know if that's a good enough ratio because like, you know, a quarter of the time I'm going to be seeing the card that like completely destroys the whole engine and makes it useless, right? But you have Trap Trick, which gets you Sanctum. If you play 2 copies of that, that's 5 copies of Sanctum, 1 copy of Scythe, and you also have 3 copies of Lilith, which makes it essentially 8 copies of Sanctum, 1 Scythe. If that's all you play, like that's a pretty good ratio to me, and I think that makes it consistent enough to really warrant like accepting like, okay, that's good enough, or I'm gonna be okay with you know, playing that in my deck. So yeah, that's just all I want to throw it out there. It's really good. I mean, going first, you just end turns with this. You just make people pass if they're playing a combo deck. And then you move to the extra deck monsters. So Beat Cop is the one, I think, true synergistic card in this deck. If you don't know, she's a generic link monster. She takes any 2 monsters, but if she's linked someone using 2 dark monsters with different names, our field spell makes all of our monsters dark, so as long as they have different names, cool. It gains this effect where you contribute 1 monster, then target a face-up card on the field and place a counter on it, and then if that card would be destroyed, you just remove that counter instead, which is really nice. So literally with Lair up, you literally use her. She's an extra card that lets you tribute an opponent's monster, right? If you didn't have like ability, like you could literally take a token, you literally just play like what, Link Spider, and as long as you have Lair up, you just take like 2 tokens into Link Spider, and then you link them up into her, and then she's going to tribute an opponent's monster to protect either herself, or you're going to protect Lair to make sure it stays up on the field, you know, for at least 1 more destruction, which is just really, really good. She's the only card that really has synergy in the deck, but I love her design, and I think she's actually good. Her effect is actually good in this deck, which is pretty cool. Then we have some fusion stuff. This is like just the Super Poly targets. This is the reason why Super Poly is so good in this deck, is we have a card like Starving Venom, which takes any 2 dark monsters on the field except for tokens. Don't forget, except for tokens. So you cannot fuse off the tokens you give them, which is not a big deal. He's so easy to make. He's so strong. He has other effects, but that's not really the point here. I don't want to go through spend too much time on that. We also have a card like Predaplant Dragostapelia, taking any fusion plus 1 dark. You look at the 2 best decks in the game. Thunder Dragons ending on Colossus plus probably a dark, and also Pendulums ending on like usually like Vortex, and hopefully there's a dark somewhere in there. So either way, both of them looking pretty you know, super polyable. The big thing about Dragostapelia, though, is that its effect is a little better. It just essentially is like a once per turn negate a monster's effect, which is definitely better for like controlling the board after than I think Starving Venom really is. So I really like Dragostapelia. I think a little more if I can make him. I think I'd probably go with him most of the time, but there are definitely also times where you go Starving Venom because he's a little better too. So don't sleep on them. They're both really good. And then one card I want to talk about for the future is when we get the Legendary Duelist pack. I think, what is it, 5 or 6? I think it might be 6. I can't remember. But we have the Predaplant support coming, and we have this specific monster coming as well. And pretty much the big thing here is, like, we can talk about his effects, which are not, like, he negates, like, special summons. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, he just can negate, like, a special summon once per turn, which is insane. But the big thing here is that when he gets huge, oh, he's 3,000. Not actually, I thought his other effect was better. But the big thing, sorry, I'm getting off topic, is that he takes 3 monsters on the field, 3 dark monsters on the field. So it just raises the ceiling. Like, you might as well just play 1 copy of this card. Most of the time, you'll probably just be making Starving Venom. But if your opponent is silly enough or naive enough or doesn't realize that this card is a thing, you're gonna rip 3 monsters off their board at once, and I don't know a deck that can survive after that as a disruption, especially a combo deck. Too strongly, especially when this card is able to negate, like, special summons from the extra deck through that. So don't sleep on this deck, guys. I'm serious. All this stuff just culminates into one actually pretty powerful rogue deck. If you see it, do not sleep on it. It does some very unfair things. Consistency can be an issue in the deck, but from when I dueled with it, it wasn't the biggest issue for sure. It wasn't the biggest problem. So don't sleep on this deck. That's all I'm trying to say. Just acknowledge all these things that this deck can do, and make sure you're ready if you ever have to face it, because I think it's as good as it's ever been, and it can only get better in the future, right? So that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more stuff from me in the future, if you want me to do more videos like this talking about decks and where they stand and if they've gotten better, like what those cards do, where they currently are, and all that shenanigans, let me know. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Peace.